Welcome back to New Rockstars. This is the big question. It's a show that gives you too much information about things like the terrifying real-world threats, so we got to brace ourselves with some chapstick. And they almost made it into our cinematic universes. And
I don't want to get sick.
What's scary about that is cinematic universes are the universe that Filup and I prefer to put all of our time and effort in, rather than the real world. So this is really threatening. So we're going to talk about some things that were removed from the Marvel Cinematic Universe and other universes for being too controversial.
And I'm Philip Molina.
And I'm Erik Voss. And we're here for you because your fantasy worlds are just as important as the real world. So Philip, our big question today is this report that the Falcon the Winter Soldier actually is going through reshoots, serious reshoots, because the first couple episodes of their season dealt with a storyline about a disease outbreak that was too similar to the coronavirus threat.
Right, it was the Modelo virus, and it was very tasty.
Even worse.
Yeah.
So I think we have to ask, what was the deal with this coronavirus storyline? Was it too controversial, really? Did it deserve being cut from the show?
Finding out exactly what the details are, I tried. I got a little bit actually, but then it was in spoiler territory, so I didn't want to follow that path too much. But no, we don't know exactly what it was, but we can assess whether or not they should have cut this thing, basically, by looking at other storylines that should have been cut in the past based on the reaction that people gave it when it came out, usually too soon. Really quick, I want to clarify a couple of things, that this is not a list of controversial stories, period. Right? It's not the hashtag Twincest video that you guys are waiting for at some point.
One day
we'll get to that disgusting, terrible storyline. But it's also not a list of just like things that are difficult to talk about, like, oh, a 9/11 story. It's like, well, some of these things, need to reflect the real world. That's what keeps them interesting. This is when people got really mad at comics for doing a story that they probably shouldn't have done at that moment. I don't necessarily think that people should have always gotten mad on that too, but you'll see that as we go.
Okay.
So ultimately what we're actually assessing is, should they have removed these things? Like my favorite thing that got removed in the recent past, the Me Too movement, making them take a scene out of Toy Story 2 where Stinky Pete is like doing a casting couch joke with these two hot Barbie twins, where he's like, I can put you in the next Toy Story movie if I get something out of it.
Yeah, they knew it was wrong when they did it.
Yeah.
I'm sure I could get you a part in Toy Story 3. I'm sorry, are we back?
These are things they did not get rid of. You ready?
Okay, let's do it.
All right, let's do it countdown style, least to most offensive, and then later we'll see where coronavirus would have fit in. All right, so first one is kind of a surprise, but you have to see it in the context of its time. In the 1940s, actually specifically in 1940, famously, Captain America #1, the cover, do you remember?
It was like a Hitler thing, right?
Yeah, it's Captain America beating out of Hitler.
And they referenced that in the MCU, right? He punched Hitler in the first movie.
Yeah, so was it a propaganda?
Yeah, it was a propaganda
exactly.
show. Yeah.
So in the comic storyline, think about, you're like, well, why is that offensive, punching Hitler? This is 1940. Specifically before the US has entered the war with Hitler. It's just a kind of foreign dictator. Now,
it was before we knew.
Yeah.
Everything.
Everybody was pro-Hitler until then. No, that's not true. But the reason it's included on this list is because there was an outrage by latent Nazi sympathizers who were like trying to be like, hey, you guys are all overreacting. The stories have been greatly exaggerated. He's a good friend of mine, but honestly, he does have a little bit of problems. But otherwise, he's pretty good.
There were a lot of American Nazi sympathizers before the war.
It turned out before we officially entered the war, people weren't necessarily against Hitler.
Yeah.
And so Captain America punching Hitler resulted in a bunch of death threats to the creators at Marvel Comics at the time. So people are actually really mad. I think, though, you know what? I'm going to say I don't like Hitler. Yeah. So I'm okay with that.
Now it's okay. And I
never liked Hitler.
I like to think at the time both of us would be very anti-Hitler. I like to think. Who knows what I would have been like in the 40s.
Next down, so that's not terribly offensive. Weirdly, it kind of was offensive to some people then. This one is from 2010. It's pretty recent, actually. And I don't know if you remember, Law & Order every week was doing ripped from the headlines for a while.
TV's longest-running primetime drama returns with an explosive ripped from the headlines case.
Hell? She cut it off. It's gone. She cut it off.
Yeah. Well, that started to spill into comics. So actually, there's a lot of comics around 2010 that are all ripped from the headlines. And this specifically, you remember the H1N1 swine flu?
I remember swine flu.
Oh, you were? Did you dress as swine flu?
Yeah, I dressed as swine flu. And
you're next on the list.
I think it was Patient Zero. It was.
Oh yeah. Well, you did that thing with that Porky.
Yeah. Well, I never saw Porky's, and I thought it was involved bestiality with the pig, and they turned that into a Black Mirror episode.
Porky's. That's a really funny Black Mirror episode. So the swine flu, they just like, even though it was like this real flu, very similar to what's going on right now, they did go ahead and make a storyline about HXN1, the mutant swine flu. But like what's offensive about it and why people are upset is it just like kind of depowers some mutants and only mutants can get it. And they're like, this is actually kind of a big deal. But ultimately, I'm going to say, not terribly offensive.
Yeah,
it's enough that people complain. They get you can assume everything on this list. Death threats were sent because they did.
I mean, it doesn't take much to get a death threat.
Yeah,
sometimes we just mispronounce Thanos.
Half of the things in this box are death threats.
Yeah, there's a lot of knives and throwing stars in there.
Yeah,
but I mean, swine flu. Some people died from it, so you can imagine at the time some people being like, "You shouldn't be pulling this from the headlines to make a superhero storyline."
Exactly, especially where like wasn't a huge tragedy there. It was kind of a lighter thing. Up next, number 3 is, again, it's Captain America, but also now from 2010, ripped from the headlines era. Captain America, him and Falcon, they go undercover in what they're calling like this intense racist redneck movement that is like all these evil bad guys. But when they portrayed what the mob of them was at a rally, it was literally just the Tea Party movement. They even used the exact signs from pictures of Tea Party protesters, which politics-wise, that's 30% of the country agrees with those politics. And then they're reading that Captain America equates them with the Nazis. Literally, there's a guy who was holding that sign and ended up in that comic as himself, and Captain America's like worst enemy at the time. Actually, weirdly, it's Captain America's in support of these people, but that's a complicated story.
I mean, some of the Tea Partiers did have super racist signs, but it's basically saying all of them are deplorable, and as we know, like you can't paint them all with a brush. Some of them have political arguments, some of them are economic arguments.
One of the signs was something like, teabag the libs before they teabag America or something, and it made it into the comic directly.
But that is something we should do. Everyone would benefit from being teabagged.
Well, and teabagging isn't always bad. It's soothing.
I have a positive association with teabagging.
Yeah.
What else does it mean other than just drinking tea?
Then dipping your scrotum into hot water.
Right. Sounds good to me. Next.
I think that one actually does slightly cross the line in that it just took real-world sentiments of fairly normal people.
It sounds like it misunderstands real-world sentiments, kind of like with H1N1 thing. They don't really get it.
What's interesting about this one, though, is they had to reprint that comic now, changing all the signs out to be Occupy Wall Street signs. Or no, who knows what they changed them to.
Swung it to the other side.
So now we're starting to get like a little more offensive. At least some amount of people that consider themselves Tea Partiers are offended by that. 2003, pretty much everybody can be offended by this one. 2003 is a very specific time in our history. We're post 9/11. We're Iraq War era kind of thing, right?
That's right.
So
Lose Yourself was on the radio.
Yeah, I know. Constantly, my mom's spaghetti was everywhere, and also everywhere the idea of jihad, right? What better way to explore that than the X-Men going on literally what's called their Holy War? The X-Men Holy War comic. And here's the thing. Okay, maybe the X-Men are going to go deal with Al-Qaeda or something. It's like,
Team America
you know what?
style.
Yeah.
America! Yeah!
Fine, yeah, right?
Yeah.
No, it has nothing to do with that. It's the phrase Holy War, but it's about Nightcrawler, who's a devout Catholic. He's training to be a priest at this time. And then this storyline reveals, no, he's not. He's secretly part of a cult. And they're crazy, and he's going to be the new pope. And they start crucifying people in front of the X-Mansion. And this is the Holy War that they're on.
It kind of sounds like a Dan Brown book, right? Like there's a secret
that
cult
actually
with a
sounds really
conspiracy to take over the papacy. Yeah, right? Wasn't that Angels and Demons?
Is that the young pope?
Yeah. The Young Pope and the New Pope, which I realize is the same show?
Yeah, it is the same show. You have one pope, two popes, young pope,
blue popes?
new pope.
Oh, that's a good Dr. Seuss when he was working for the Catholic Church.
That's a good Dr. Seuss.
That's a good Dr. Seuss.
So got more offensive, and then I'm just gonna take it. I definitely, didn't go to everything I could have on this list, but this one really this is our number one most controversial. Should have never done this story. And it is surprising how many were similar to this, but I'll just give you one specific one. It's from the 80s. It's a character.
Not a good start.
I know. Those Stranger Things kids are in for some trouble. The character's name that they have, this is a DC comic, is Extraño, which could be translated to queer.
Okay.
He's the first openly gay DC superhero, and he shows it to you as much as he can. He wears women's jewelry. He calls himself Auntie for some reason, and he says a lot of like, listen, honey, when he's saving someone. But that's not the part that put it on the list, actually.
What?
It's the part where Extraño contracts HIV, and that's not the worst part, because people were getting it in the 80s. It's the way he gets it is from an AIDS vampire named Hemoglobin.
What? What?
Excuse me, Hemogoblin.
Oh no. That's terrible.
I mean, it's a pretty good pun.
You could imagine some like 80s writer being like, wait a minute, if I just move the letters.
Yeah, my dyslexia.
Nailed it.
Just
I'm
came up
buying a
with it.
house, baby.
Nancy, I came up with an AIDS vampire. It's gonna fix everything.
She's like, don't pretend like I'm your wife. I know you're that man across the street.
I'm putting it in the art. It's for research. Extraño, you understand me. So he gets AIDS basically from an AIDS vampire, as was happening in the 80s.
Right, there was a lot of vampires and they were all gay, right? That's
So,
not a stereotype at all.
Here's the thing. So that's like about as offensive as you can get. And at the time, people did acknowledge like, holy crap, this is so bad. But I'm gonna say, again, kind of like I was saying earlier, it's not the subject matter that makes it, they can't do this. It's the approach, right? It's an AIDS vampire or something. So I'm gonna give Marvel some credit. Just, that's the end of the offensive stuff. But the same concept, because AIDS was such a big epidemic and it was a virus that people were very worried about, Marvel, a few years later, so in 92, with an Alpha Flight story, this is one where they had been implying North Star was gay for a long time. But they wouldn't really go into it. North Star decides to adopt a baby who has AIDS, who is dying. Oh my God. And then the baby dies, and North Star decides that this is the moment that he should come out, and he officially comes out as gay. Oh, wow. And it's kind of just like this intense kind of dramatic storyline that also has, heroes and villains and whatnot in it. But there's no like AIDS vampire, getting to the baby.
That sounds like plays in the history of gay people being like portrayed as villains, or a lot of villains being kind of effeminate or gay.
Gay-coded, right?
Gay-coded, yeah. And so the fact that you'd use that and use like the whole blood transfusion thing is just kind of sick.
So the idea that to cover this story in this slightly more nuanced way still was hated at the time and was covered very negatively, but nowhere near as bad as Extraño and Hemogoblin was received. And then I'll even remind you, we were talking about this at the same time, Captain Planet was dealing with
There's a Captain
AIDS
Planet
stories.
episode, and I told this to like my sister at one point. She's like, "You imagine that? That was never an episode of Captain Planet." Captain Planet, super progressive show from the early '90s and late '80s, whenever that ran for. That like a kid got gay.
And that kid was me.
There was a kid who had AIDS and was getting bullied and ostracized. Captain Planet had to step in and be like, look, this is something that a lot of people just have to deal with.
5 rings were put together to bring Captain Planet to Omaha.
To give a lecture to a bunch of... I don't think he did any actual combat or fighting. He just had a nice, empathetic conversation with people about how we shouldn't demonize people for their diseases or illnesses.
Yeah. I do remember this episode, but to be fair, because you've talked about it a number of times, so
it stayed with
could
me
not
for
be
years.
real, though. It is possible that in your,
Because
as a dream you had.
You shouldn't really trust any of my memories.
I had a dream, I got gay, and then Captain Planet made me straight. Isn't that what Scared Straight is?
So with all these storylines that had to be changed or reversed, where does coronavirus?
Right. So, and this is, I think, going to be a discussion with you here, because you can see that people's outrage can be ridiculous, right? It
Yes.
can be kind of stupid. I'll say my position on the coronavirus is I'm pro-coronavirus. Is that I think right now, because people are dying, literally today, people will die from the coronavirus. And if you're watching this in the future, you know that most of us have by now. But people are dying, then yes, if the storyline on the show is people are catching this virus and dying, then yes, I think that's we go there for escapism. We don't need to repeat it. My caveat is if it's actually a Marvel-y virus or something, I was talking to you about the possibility, what if it's a nanovirus and it's actually the Ultron virus or something,
Right,
and it's
yeah.
this kind of cool sci-fi concept, then hell yeah, do it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, who cares, do it. I just don't know which one it is.
Yeah, I think even if say coronavirus kind of peaked and then subsided, and then a couple months later the season comes out and they know what happened with it, I think it'd be okay to do. The problem is just we don't know how bad it's gonna get. And you can imagine Disney being this could be a really horrible pandemic, and we don't want our show to come out in the midst of people afraid to leave their homes,
Right.
cities quarantined all over the world. So you can imagine it's probably just like some calculus by the show trying to prognosticate where it's going to go.
Yeah. So where do you land on it? Should they cancel this thing or that story or not?
I think I can imagine being a producer on that show and worried about how bad it's going to get. And if you're able to switch it out for something that's not specific to a disease outbreak, that's where people coughing, sneezing, wearing medical masks, and showing like third world countries that are going to hell as a result of like Ebola style panic. Yeah, maybe change it. Especially if you have Disney money, you can reshoot whole things. Yeah, take it back into the workshop, tinker whatever you want, make it better, give it back to us.
Now, follow-up question: which of these stories is your favorite? That you're the biggest fan of?
You know what? I love that X-Men Holy War storyline. I think that sounds kind of interesting.
Well, it's also garbage. Like it just like doesn't live up to.
Think of it. I mean, I don't want to offend anyone in their like religious politics, but like the history of the Catholic Church at one point was just like 3 different cults deciding which pope had like the biggest army, and that pope became the new pope of like history. So like kind of reminding people of like the history of all these world religions, that they're all just kind of like whichever group is the most impassioned believers gets to win the day. That's probably not where they were going, but just like if some of the writers took that big picture perspective when they were writing it, I think that's interesting to do.
You could work in propaganda and marketing because you just...
I already do.
Yeah, that's true. You just rephrased Holy War as religious politics.
Yes. Holy War.
Sounds sexy.
My eyebrows going up just equals sexy.
Your eyebrow just goes up involuntarily.
Yes, it does. So let's move on to our next question.
What are you trying to tell me?
I think I'm still figuring that out. What do you want me to say?
Mine is voluntary. That's it. They should have done it.
Yeah, they should have kept it.
Maybe.
Yeah.
We completely changed our answers. Well, definitive answers.
Clearly, Bucky thinks we should have done it. Look at him. He's so mad at Disney for cutting this coronavirus.
I think he wasn't looking like that when before I threw the pencil.
Clearly, Bucky. Doesn't it look like they're in a hospital there? And they're mad that they're been quarantined inside.
The real question is our thumbnail too offensive for this episode?
You've already decided that before watching more than 3 seconds of this video.
Yeah.
Thanks for those comments, by the way. Before we move on to some other things that we want to answer, we just want to remind everyone that currently, really, the hottest place to be in like the realm of New Rockstars land is our Discord.
Oh, I thought you were going to say a club in New York. Our Discord has everything.
Under Siege. It has
spoiler channels.
That MCU. Diva, 2 different people
Those are just different
that
people.
emerged them.
A shout out to, what's her name?
Teens.
John the editor is a big fan of Teens.
All these people are there. It's a wild rave.
Separate from, he also is a fan of the person with the username Teens.
The reason why we keep talking about this is like we didn't intend for like our Discord. We just wanted to offer something that we could like connect with people on like a different platform.
And we're fucking loving it.
It's become like this amazing group conversation.
I'm like on it at the gym now, except when I'm driving and swerving.
Yeah, you guys are giving us such an interesting run for our money with these topics and these questions.
And now they're putting big questions in there, and then they're answering them for us sometimes. But we came up with this new idea that people are going to start playing Rogue Theory on there and be awarded points and kind of have like a
simulated Rogue Theory. So we're going to try to come up with like new different like digital ways that we can connect with people.
Since we can't touch people anymore because of coronavirus.
That's right. But yeah, the way you become a member of this Discord server is by becoming a patron of New Rockstars. So you have to become a patron of our Patreon. It's just something that we offer our patrons for being so generous and kind and helpful and supportive of this channel and our growth, is a way that you can just talk to us and a way that we can hear from you and like learn about you guys and your lives. And we can create like new ways that we can like show our appreciation for you.
Somebody asked me on Instagram in a DM, they're like, I tried messaging you a couple different places this question and I kind of don't know where to get an answer. And I was like, honestly, if you're on Discord, I'm like probably gonna like give you a too long of an answer. Because there I can kind of like spend some time. And then Instagram DM or on Twitter or whatever, it's kind of hard to you know elongate any thought.
It might be something about like Discord's platform. And anytime I bring this up, it sounds like I'm working for Discord to try to promote, but it's just like the layout of it makes it really easy for me to see like, oh, there's this topic going on in like the Marvel area. So I'm gonna go to the Marvel corner and see like what people are talking about with like Falcon Winter Soldier news. And then going back to Clone Wars to see what people talk about Clone Wars.
I forgot to get a drink earlier, so if you guys can just help me out.
What is this? Have we been able to have imaginary drinks? And I'm bringing my mug like a sucker.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Bite size.
Bite size. I can handle a bite sized.
All right. I've heard you rant on this topic before, and I kind of want to consolidate your thoughts and just throw it at you. So this one's actually just coming from me.
Oh, okay.
Bite-sized question. Is and in what ways is Disney about to take over the world?
They already have. You have heard me. Thank you for listening to my rants. Because yes, this is
Screams.
We are in a fascinating time with Disney's making a lot of big moves, and if you've been like reading through the lines of like a lot of headlines that have come out recently, you can see how Disney's actually shifting the whole filmmaking industry to a very specific thing that's going to be very profitable for them. So last week, Bob Chapek is now taking over as CEO for Disney from Bob Iger. And while that seems like I don't know what this means, Bob Chapek was head of Disney Parks, Experiences, and Products. Unlike past CEOs of Disney, he doesn't really have a background in film and TV.
I don't like where this is going.
Well, it actually could be something really cool. Bob Iger used to be head of Paramount. He was a filmmaking guy. Now the company is becoming more about its experiences. So this is coming at the same time that Disney just raised its ticket prices for Disneyland to over $200.
I really don't like where this is going.
Oh, yeah. This is also coming at the same time where things like Galaxy's Edge are redefining the Disney experience.
So it is a canon ride, right?
It is canon. It's part of the Star Wars timeline of narrative. It's linked to the narrative of the movies and the streaming series that you watch. And they're learning a lot of lessons from Harry Potter, Wizarding World of Harry Potter through Universal. They're now shifting all of their parks to being like cinematic experiences that link to the movies you watch. In California Adventure, it's all Pixar Pier. So it's like you ride the Incredibles ride and you're riding an Incredibles story of chasing down Jack through what used to just be a roller coaster. And of course, Disney Plus is changing the game in a lot of ways. They're really just entering this game to try to muscle up against Netflix, and they already own the majority stake in Hulu, but I think they want to take over the streaming content world. And then, of course, they own all of Fox's properties, and they own Sony's most profitable property, which is Spider-Man, or they co-own it. They can get a lot of money from the merchandising. They can find Spider-Man in their parks. And in Disney parks, they're going to be launching a new Marvel land. And then the biggest one that I think most people do not know about, because it's kind of confusing, it's kind of inside baseball, the Paramount ruling has been reversed by the Justice Department.
What's the Paramount ruling?
The Paramount ruling came out in 1948. Paramount was in a lawsuit with the United States about antitrust. So basically what, at the time they decided, is that film studios cannot also own the way their films are exhibited around the country. So that's why
they can't own a movie theater.
They can't own a movie theater chain that competes. So they can't own all the means of their production and make all the money from it. So that's why you have things like AMC, Cinemark, ArcLight, these other movie chains, smaller movie chains, and they aren't like the Paramount chain or the Fox chain or the Disney chain or the Universal chain. Now the Justice Department's saying that's not really necessary. So people are wondering how this is going to change the industry. Is it going to make it harder for smaller film theaters to compete because they don't have the financial backing of the studios themselves? Because currently the business model is you go to AMC and really they make their money from concessions and other kind of services that they can provide. You can do AMC stubs and
a minion in the back.
So how is this all going to change? Why am I bringing this up? Well, I think what we're seeing now is movies are changing. They're becoming bigger tentpole experiences, and that's how Disney's whole business models work. Things like Endgame and The Lion King and their Pixar films are becoming billion-dollar movies, and they're making fewer and fewer smaller budget films that are kind of what we consider to be like normal movies. Things like Knives Out, which was like an original film, moderate budget, made a decent amount of money. You don't see a lot of those movies anymore, and Disney is leading this charge. So I think by having someone like Bob Chapek running their studio, that sends a signal to their shareholders that they're going to start doubling down on their most profitable line item, which is parks. They don't make as much money from films, because films, sometimes you lose a lot of money. They cost a lot of money to produce and to market. Sometimes your margins on that aren't that big. I know this is all basically like, how does this all relate to the way I experience movies? Basically, my prediction for the next 15 years is you're going to start seeing Disney theaters in every major city.
And the movies are exclusive?
The movies are exclusive Disney movies.
Like Disney Plus.
So rather than going to AMC and you can watch Sonic, or you can watch Star Wars, or you can watch Knives Out, you're going to go to a Disney theater to where your only options are a Star Wars movie, a Marvel theory, a Pixar movie, maybe some classic films that they're re-releasing. And those films are not going to be just simple films. They're going to be immersive 4D experiences that cost like 40 or 50 bucks because their whole idea is spectacle. And they realize that most people now are sitting at home, they're watching streaming series, they're watching Netflix, they're watching Disney Plus. I think they'll still release normal movies on those platforms, but if they're going to get you out of your house, it's going to be like going to see Disney on Ice, or it's going to be going to like a smaller version of Galaxy's Edge, where it's like, not only are you going to go there and you're going to experience this movie, there's going to be associated canonical games. You're gonna meet Iron Man, you're gonna build a droid, and it's all gonna be linked with like the narrative experience. And the only way you can truly experience this MCU 10 or 15 years from now will be to go to this Disney theater and hopefully go to Disneyland in Anaheim or Disney World in Orlando once a year to fully experience the MCU.
It kind of, there's a lo-fi crappy version of it at the El Capitan. Right. Where you go there, that's the Disney-owned theater, where every movie release, they show one big movie at a time and the whole place is decked out completely, but it's all cardboard cutouts. But with Disney budget, maybe it's actually interactive things that like you have to solve on your way in, like a Dan Brown novel.
And people will pay it. I think that's the thing. If you can make it so that it is essential, so you don't have that fear of missing out, like you're gonna have some diehard Marvel, Star Wars,
I'd do it.
Yeah, I would do it too. And if you could just say, we're gonna require you to do this 4 or 5 times a year, you make a lot more money from those people than just having those movies be $10 movies that you have to share the profits with AMC.
What's funny is in my head, my imagination started to go like more and more advanced, where it's not just a projection screen in front of you, the side screens are also relevant, the seats you're in are like seats of the ship or whatever. And then I was like, and then the actors, they're not on the screen, they're there. And slowly I created theater.
It's just this
and it's just like really stupid like costumes. They're like, yeah!
Which it might feel silly, but imagine seeing a movie, but there's an associated VR experience that's a maze or an escape room. And that way, like your environment is part of your, like the walls come alive, and it's kind of like when you go through Galaxy's Edge or when you go through Wizarding World of Harry Potter, it's like an experience. And to a lot of people, that is far more of an effective, emotional thing, a satisfying experience than just like watching a movie on a screen. Because that can feel like, oh, I can watch this on any screen. I can watch it on my phone or I can watch it on my TV at home. So they're gonna have to start thinking out of the box, and how can we get people to a space and charge them 4 times as much?
Let me throw out, kind of makes me think, could you imagine Don't Breathe as a movie-going experience?
Oh, yeah.
Where you're like, kind of like, he's there too, and you have to kind of escape the theater.
Yeah, like a monster in the house, and you hear his breathing behind you, or you don't know.
That sounds terrifying. Also, you're saying that's within the next 15 years?
I think we'll start to see it in the next, I don't know if it'll take over.
I'll say in 16 and a half years, holodeck. That's where you're headed.
Yeah, we'll all have holodecks. I'm calling it now. I think at some point in our lifetimes, the term going to see a Disney will be a thing, as opposed to we go to see movies right now.
Yeah, let's all go to the Disney.
It's gonna be like, let's all go to the Disney.
Cool.
So that's Eric's big Disney theory for where it's all going, how they're taking over.
This is the first time I've heard you somewhat sober saying that.
We have time
Editors, help me out.
We have time for one more bite-sized question. This one wants to know, what was your worst, they're standing right behind me, aren't they, moment? So you're talking shit about someone or you're doing something embarrassing and someone catches you in the moment.
Yeah, that I can think of like you got caught talking shit moment. Oh, I don't know if I can talk about it though.
Yes, you can. No one sees this.
Okay. I used to work for a YouTuber.
Oh, maybe we shouldn't talk about this. Okay, tell me more.
And it was my first job in YouTube. And why was you have popcorn in there?
Yeah. Alcoholic popcorn.
I got you soaked. It was my first job in YouTube, and he or she was insane, like every YouTuber, all of them.
All of us.
Every single one of them is insane and a crazy person, because this job your mind up.
It's not healthy.
You have the exposure of a minor celebrity, but immediate access to feedback about you that people would never say to a minor celebrity, right?
Yes.
Like, you don't go to a person kind of like, hey, here's why you're ugly and what you're doing wrong.
Right.
And then also a DM telling you that I hate you. So you get all this negative feedback, but you don't have the support system of like the studios, and you have agents, and like, don't worry, those are whatever. You just like sit in your room and read all that. So he had really, or she had really gone down that path, and it made it impossible to work with this person because they became so obsessed with perfection. I actually have suffered from a version of this myself, and to you hosting Rockstars, but it makes you so crazy, and so everyone was just miserable working there, and then he or she had us keep working on this one new pilot idea, this great new comedy series, and they had to rewrite it again and again and again and again and again. And then they started sending it out to, I kind of ran things so I could see all the correspondence, and they started sending it out to all these other writers, write this thing again and again and again. And I got kind of sick of it. At one point I was bitching, so I sent a text message to a friend that worked there, and I was like, can you believe this bullshit that, this person is doing this thing now? I can't believe it. I'm so sick of this, yada yada. And then I just looked and I was like, no, I immediately sent it to the YouTuber because their name was right there. And I was like, well, if that's the subject of my text, I should send it to that person. So I just thought like, that's who I'm talking about. So I just sent it completely stream of consciousness directly to them. And then I just sat and waited for a bit. And I was like, yeah, that wasn't to you.
I feel like at that point you kind of like make it into a joke.
I
like,
tried.
What if I really felt that?
Yeah, no, but it didn't work. And then luckily everyone was getting fired because the whole company was being shut down. And she had already fired like 15 people at that point. So there was only 2 of us left. And so I got a call like a week later. And he's like, well, as you know, things are shutting down. So we're gonna have to let you go. And I was like, oh, cool. No worries. And here she goes. And the text message. Come on. I was like, yeah, I know. But I got caught.
Hey, but if they deserved it, one of the worst things you could do is when you are 12 years old, as I was. This is my
hate it.
It was picture day at our school. So I went to Catholic school. We wore white polos, navy blue pants, but on picture day you could wear nicer clothes. So I had a button-up shirt, and I never wore button-up shirts. So we were changing for gym in the bathroom, the boys' bathroom, and like I realized as I was taking off my shirt, I was like, this feels seductive? I don't know. It was like we were all doing a bit where it's like, yeah, another button down, another button down. We were all. I think everyone was doing this.
That's how that works in the boys' locker rooms.
Yeah. So then as I was the last one to do it, of course, because all the other guys had done it, and then I took it off, and that last button I was like, okay, well if I'm the last one, I really got to turn this into a fun thing. So I took my shirt, I started like strip tease, spinning it over my head, and then I saw the other guys, PJ, Matt, Donkey Dog, Doug, Squee, they all go and like pointed behind me and like immediately dropped their stuff, and and then I was like, yeah, right, what? And I turn around and it's our gym coach, Coach L. I won't call you out, but he goes,
don't stop.
Don't look at me! Put the lotion on its skin! He said,
sucks his whistle.
Sucks the whistle. He said, Mr. Voss, you got a show going on, huh? Want me to bring the girls in here? Is that what's going on? And I said, no. No, I don't want you to bring the girls. He's like, so you want me to bring more boys in here? It's like, no. What do you want?
I don't know myself yet.
Piss goes down my leg. It's like,
start working it.
Start working it in. Yeah, so that was, and I will never take off my clothes ever again. I'm never nude. Never nude because of this story.
Interesting.
So you won't find me without a shirt on or without pants on. But I will put on more clothes. So send me clothes at our P.O. Box.
Honestly?
Address down below. If you send it to me, I will wear it. Ask that MCU
Youth extra large?
Yes, but not adult extra small. I want to feel like a little boy. And this is our Neverland here at Little New Rockstars. Hey, thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, send us at New Rockstars using the hashtag Big Question. Also, you can mail us at the address we've said, and we will read it on air. We were just having a discussion over whether we should cut something that we saw in this episode. Let us know in the comments below what you think it was, just like how we were wondering what the coronavirus storyline was in Falcon Winter Soldier. That also is something that we
had to cut something from the episode.
We better get out of here. Thanks for joining us. Subscribe to New Rockstars for breakdowns and conversations that you are going to get too much information about. Follow Filup at Filup Molina. Follow me at EA Voss, and follow New Rockstars on all social media. And make sure to follow The Big Question as a podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. See you next week, folks. Bye.